Good morning, Grinders. Welcome to RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD. You're going to follow me on Twitter. And it's Tuesday, December 3rd. We'll be taking a look at tonight's 8 game NBA DFS slate on DraftKings. So hit that thumbs up button. Even though some thumbs, hit the thumbs up button, the like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell to always know when we go live. Remember, later today, 5 p.m. Eastern, Grinders Live, followed directly by Crunch Time for all your late news leading up until lock for tonight's NBA slate, which we got 8 games, Tim, and it's every time me and you, it's an NBA Cup time, NBA Cup. Time. Yeah, NBA Cup, and I look at the injured list, and I'm is there anything that matters? As far as matters that much, as far as who we're like, and no, it doesn't seem like any like big guys are out. I mean, some role players, I guess, but I mean, obviously it's NBA. So like 2 hours from now, they could be like, oh, this guy's not playing, and Giannis, hang nail, who knows, But as of 11 o'clock in the morning, Tim, I'm assuming we're not expecting anything.
As of right now, we're not expecting anything. The big stuff that we already have is the Hornets injury stuff. LaMelo Ball is out. Bridges is out. Mann is out. Grant Williams is obviously out. So that's like the biggest news as of right now. No, I do think that you're correct though that there really isn't any like big Q tags that we're waiting on, and there are far less shenanigans during these cup games because there are pretty big fines for players that sit for cup games. So I'm not expecting anything drastic to be happening, but who knows? It's still the NBA. That could be complete BS. What I just said by tip off. So, but yeah, the Hornets is the big stuff with no Ball. So I think we should actually talk about that game first.
Okay, well, I mean, I bring up lineup HQ with the Q tags here. Anyone that is questionable, we always list in the projections. Anyone that's doubtful or out will no longer be in the projections. That includes SimLabs as well. So I got 9:27 a.m. projections. We're gonna look at SimLabs in a little bit. But you mentioned the Hornets. The Hornets have one of the lowest implied team totals on the entire slate. So I take a look and I go, okay, here's this Pacers-Raptors game. That is a huge total, right? We got the Grizzlies-Mavericks game. That has a huge total. And then, Cleveland is massive favorites over the Wizards. And then this 76ers-Hornets game has a total of 211.5. And it seems like the best point per dollar play on the entire slate is Brandon Miller at 8K. And, I mean, it doesn't matter. Tim, is it the type of thing where it doesn't matter that the Hornets have 103.5 implied team total? It's just that if you take a look at who's available for the Hornets, who else is going to score points? Who else is going to score fantasy points other than, it's going to be Brandon Miller and a whole bunch of like cheaper guys. So are we just plugging and playing Miller into most of our lineups? He's eligible at both shooting guard and small forward, so he fits in the guard utility and the forward utility. I mean, there's enough value on the slate. 8K isn't like breaking the bank. So are we targeting multiple Hornets players?
We are going to be targeting multiple Hornets players, believe it or not. And Miller is definitely going to be your first guy in. With no Ball, Bridges on the court, Miller has almost a 6% usage increase, up to like 33% usage. So for 8K, shooting guard, small forward, Brandon Miller, I think if he comes in, let's say, I don't know, like around 40%, I'm getting him in Sims at like 60% right now. So He's definitely the top play, I think, in optimals, and I'm getting the most of him of any player in our initial run in Sims. So Brandon Miller to me really is the top play on the entire board.
We see in lineup HQ as far as our initial projections, guys like Misic at point guard, Salon at power forward. I mean, you got Josh Green. I mean, you got a lot. How confident are we in the rotation as far as the Hornets are concerned? I mean, I have to assume that Brandon Miller is going to be playing max minutes pretty much no matter what. But is there some amount of volatility on the rest of these guys?
So the other good thing about this game is that it's the first game in the slate, so we're going to know the starting lineup. Assuming Micic and Salon start, I see no issue. I see very, very minimal risk in their minutes. So I think their spot in the rotation will be solidified, and I'm not concerned about that at all whatsoever. It's not going to be Cody Martin or Nick Smith or Seth Curry that takes these minutes from them. So it's just I'm not worried about them at all. It's really just those three main guys for the Hornets too. I have no interest in Josh Green. He's just like a Tony Snell. You know, he just kind of stands in the corner and does cardio. And then Nick Richards is too expensive, especially with Mark Williams back. So those centers on the Hornets are too expensive with the split that they have. So it's really just Micic, Salon, and Miller. I don't know I guess the question really becomes like, how many of them can you play? Can you play all three in the same lineup? I think you probably can, just because of how cheap Micic and Salon are. But I think I'd be making a rule to get at least one of these guys in every lineup if I was making 150 teams tonight.
Well, in our early run of SimLabs, Micic is one of the most negative leverage players on the slate. Meaning that he's most overrun. We have him at 33% projected ownership, and obviously, I always say it's 11 in the morning. This stuff changes throughout the day. Projections get updated and whatever. But as of now, 33% projected ownership. He's only optimal, I think, 15% of the time. So that is massively overowned. But we'll take a look at SimLabs in a little bit. Are there any other games, like I mentioned before, these totals like like Pacers, Raptors, Grizzlies, Mavericks? Yet I take a look at lineup HQ sorting by RGV, which is salary adjusted plus minus. I don't necessarily I see more Toronto, like Scotty Barnes at 8,300. Point guard, a small forward eligible, which means obviously he fits in a lot of spots for the utility spots on DraftKings. SimLabs has him as one of the most over-owned players, 32% projected ownership. But you have to think that, I mean, if we would just highlight this Indianapolis-Toronto game, right? Barnes, Barrett, Pirtle, I guess, here. We have Grady Dick is questionable. Is that going to matter all that much? I'm not sure. Can you talk a little bit about Toronto and the Pacers? Because the Pacers, I look on the other side, and it's like it's a whole bunch of people that are about mid-priced, and their production kind of just spreads out amongst all of them. Like any one of these guys could have a ceiling game, but yeah, they have 120.75 implied team total, but it's quite possible no one has a flame, that they score that many points, but no one has a flame emoji. And you're just sitting there going, okay, all these guys are fine, but it's not like you're jamming multiple Pacers into your line.
No, I mean, none of the Pacers rate out that well. I don't mind Tyrese Halliburton at 8,400 just because I don't think he's going to get a lot of ownership. And we know that he has well over a 50-point DK point ceiling. So I think he's completely fine in GPPs. But yeah, this Raptors team, like we may lose 28 Grady Dick minutes. So that would just increase some of Barrett's minutes, maybe by a couple extra Scotty Barnes minutes, but they don't even need them. They rate out really well. They're both, extremely strong plays. I prefer Barnes over Barrett, but that's just I think because Scotty runs the point a little bit more. So I do prefer Barnes over Barrett. But these are definitely like Scotty Barnes, definitely a cash game play. Now whether or not you want to eat that 35% projected ownership when it comes to tip off, that's kind of up to you. But I would assume, what's his opto rate? Do we have that pulled up? I mean, I assume he's gonna have
Barnes is negative leverage. Barnes is -8. I mean, we take a look at just a point like Misic, -15, Barnes -8, right? Even if we take a look at small forward, right? Barnes is -8, right? I mean, it doesn't mean you can't play him. It's just you take a look.
Right.
You take a look. You don't want to play multiple negative leverage players in your lineup. The whole purpose of these numbers are to guide you on lineup construction with those players in. Meaning that if you're going to play Scotty Barnes, you're probably going to want to play a positive leverage player from another position or another team. Playing Paul, like it seems like Paul George is underowned according to SimLabs. So especially like if you're going to play like that, this would be good for like if you play Misic. This is the type of stuff that I talk about in Theory of DFS, my DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com. The heuristics that you need in order to build plus EV lineups. Now, SimLabs can help you do a lot of that, but like Paul George, we have as positive leverage, meaning underowned, right? So you see Paul George is here, 14.98% projected ownership. We have his effective ownership, his efficient ownership at like 23. If you're going to play someone like Misic, which SimLab shows as negative leverage, and you go, well, I want to play the punt $4,500 point guard. Well, what better way to play him with a positive leverage player, and especially a leverage player that's in the same game, right? Because most likely, if the game is close and goes over its total, the starters' minutes are going to be correlative to each other. So if the Hornets and the 76ers are going up and down the court scoring a lot of points, playing Misic and George together provide you some amount of correlation. Now, correlations in NBA aren't like strong or anything, but it's enough where, hey, if I'm going to play Misic in my lineup, I'm going to play Paul George instead of playing Scotty Barnes, right? Because Scotty Barnes is also negative leverage. If you're going to play Misic, maybe you play Misic and Miller and George, and he's kind of a little three-man stack of the game or something like that. But this is the way you could use SimLabs, even if you're not going to use SimLabs to like generate lineups or anything like that, or do any more research. You could just come here and just go, okay, we have Wemby as a high positive leverage, Hartenstein, Jonas Valanciunas, we'll have to talk about in a second also. And you go, okay, well, all the guys that have big red bars in it, you could just write down on a sheet of paper and go, I don't want to play more than one or two of these guys in my lineup at all, right, for GPPs. Right. And then you go and you write down all the big green players, right? And you go, all I have to do is play one or two of these guys, and I'm good, right? And I'm just like, okay, don't play one or two of the big red bars, play one or two of the big green bars, and then fill out the rest of your lineup any way you want, right? Just you can essentially optimize for projection at that point. And then you have the nice balance of leverage and projection in your lineup. Now, SimLabs, the whole point of SimLabs is that it kind of does that for you, right? But if you want a hand build, you could just come here and see who do we have compared to our projected ownership and projections is more overowned or underowned. And remember, like I said, it doesn't mean you fade all the overowned players. The reason why they're owned is because they project well. If you faded all of the big red bar players, your projection is going to be like 25, 30 points lower than everyone else's lineup.
You're giving up a ton of opto rate if you do that.
Right. Yeah. Right. These are still high optimal rate players. It's just that they're over, like Misic, right? -15. Like he's projected to be 33% owned. So basically the opto rate is 18%. 18% opto rate is still a very high opto rate for a $4,500 player on an 8-game slate. So it's like, oh, I'm not going to play Misic. I'm going to play some other $4,500 guy that has a 4% optimal rate who's going to be 3% owned. And it's like, well, if the rest of your lineup is contrarian enough, you'd rather just play the guy that has an 18% optimal rate, even if he's going to be 50% owned, because it doesn't matter what the ownership is at that point. But I'm kind of explaining the heuristics in what SimLabs would be used for. But if you just want to, just understand why SimLabs is coming up with certain lineups and certain constructions the way they are, it's doing all that balance for you. And depending on the ownership and how it's spread out amongst the slate, sometimes you'll find in SimLabs, Tim, I'm sure you've run SimLabs plenty of times where you think you need to be more contrarian and then you don't. And you go, well, obviously I can't play this guy and this guy and this guy together. And then next thing you know, you go SimLabs and it's like, oh, it actually allows me that there's plenty of lineups that play two of those guys. Oh, I thought I had to be more contrarian. And then there are other slates where you're like, well, I think it's perfectly fine to play these three guys together. And then SimLabs tells you, no, you have to get real contrarian on this type of slate because these 2-3 guys are way over-owned, and especially salary and positional dynamics are like, yeah, if you play this 12K guy with this 5K guy, you're going to run into a lot of combinations positionally of the same lineups. So you probably shouldn't be playing those two people together. Like SimLabs is going to tell you all of that. But that being said, is there anyone on the slate? I mean, obviously we have Jonas Valanciunas at 5,200 in the center spot. Yep. 24 minutes for Washington against Cleveland, even though Cleveland's a big favorite. Is the leverage on the slate from a positional salary dynamic to just pay up for Wemby at center at 10-6 and just build your lineup any the hell way you want, or play someone like Giannis, like something, because it seems like most of these builds with Miller Barnes is going to be just kind of like in the middle. Very balanced style builds should be more popular. I know you were on Wemby last Tuesday. Are you on Wemby this Tuesday?
I'm certainly in the Wemby camp over the Giannis camp, I guess is what I'd say. I'm getting to Wemby in 15% on SimLabs right now. Not getting to a lot of Giannis at all. I think that makes a ton of sense. I mean, getting contrarian by playing Wemby, I think, is a fantastic play. Like, anytime you can get somebody with that kind of a ceiling at super low ownership, I think it makes a ton of sense for larger field GPPs. I don't think you have to get that fancy in smaller single entry type stuff, but for like the $5 tonight, the 150 max $5, I think playing Wemby makes a ton of sense because we're going to get to like Valanciunas is going to be, I think, the chalkiest mid-range center. He's 5,200, and I think there's a lot of I know that Valanciunas sims really well, but I mean he's really fragile because if he doesn't get the minutes, his minutes are not guaranteed. So I mean he is so horrible defensively that they might just take him right out of the game. So he might only play. It would not shock me at the end of the night if he played 16 minutes. So, it's like I think he's a little bit risky, I think. But if he gets the minutes, he's going to absolutely smash. So if he gets over his 24-minute projection, he'll absolutely crush. So, but I was just surprised to see how well he was simming. I thought he might be somebody that didn't sim very well just because I consider him a little bit fragile.
I like this lineup over here, lineup 2. Got Scotty Barnes. So this is the Wemby lineup. And you put him with Vassell and Paul, right, for San Antonio, with Iguodaro.
Who I like Iguodaro quite a bit. He was like one of my, I thought he was going to be a little bit sneakier than that, but I guess 16% isn't bad. Go ahead, Blender.
Right.
I'm sorry.
$3,800 player. I mean, yeah.
Right.
But I mean, here's a lineup that doesn't have Miller, but does have Salon.
Yep.
And instead of playing Valanciunas, you're playing Alex Sarr, because you're probably not going to play Sarr and Valanciunas together.
Correct.
Right. And they're both fine. They're both, I mean, they're both fine. I this seems like the type of lineup where it's chalky enough, but also not. It's still contrary. You're playing Scotty. If you wanted to play Brandon Miller, the whole point of SimLabs is that this lineup, the reason why it's Scotty Barnes over Brandon Miller has to do with some dynamic of ownership or whatever. I mean, obviously you have to fit. You move Chris Paul to the point guard spot, and you move Brandon Miller into the guard utility spot. But the whole point of this is to show that, SimLabs is showing that this lineup with Scotty Barnes is better than the ones that don't have, like you take a look that instead of having Brandon Miller, like even in this Wemby lineup, and Wemby's only projected to be 8% owned, I'm not sure how many Barnes Miller lineups there are. And obviously, if you're playing Wemby, it's kind of hard to play Barnes and Miller together. Oh, here's one. Here's Paul, Miller, Barnes, Salon, Wemby, Vassell, LaRavia at 0.7% and Iguodala. So it's very similar lineup, but you're playing like Jake LaRavia, and probably not a big fan of that.
Not huge on that. I like the beginning of that lineup quite a bit, but then it gets a little bit weak there at the bottom. But I think there's ways that you can play that first five and not give up too much of a projection, because I think that is a pretty good start of a lineup.
So you prefer so Oso Iguodala, you have. I mean he's not going to be unowned or anything like that, but you'd rather play. Who would you rather play? Him? Like if you had a choice, like I think power forward. I mean, people are going to go cheap because you got Salon there, you got Iguodala there. Obviously, you got Misic at point guard. Valanciunas is 5,200. I don't consider him a punt player or anything like that. But out of the punt plays, which ones do you prioritize? Which ones do you prioritize over the other? Do you think it's imperative to play at least one Hornet in your lineup, even if it's not Brandon Miller? You want to play one of Miller, Salon, Misic, and how would you? What between Salon and Misic, which one would you rather play?
I would rather play Micic, straight up, but I know that there's like a $700 difference. So, but I'd rather play Micic.
You'd probably rather play a lineup that's Misic, Salon, Misic, and with Iguodala, than with like Salon and no Micic. So like I'm all I'm asking for is so I could put this into SimLabs, so we could see what the rest of the lineup looks like if you make these types of combinations. Because remember, I said before, you saw in SimLabs, Misic is one of the most like over-owned players. Yeah. So it's like, well, if we pair him with Iguodala, what do the lineups need to look like? Because I'll run this, and maybe you look at these lineups, Tim, and you vomit in your mouth, and you go, I don't like these lineups, and if I have to do this in order to play this combination, maybe I shouldn't be playing that combination.
Sims are very humbling, right? Like you feel like you're sharp, and then you enter them in, and you're like, oh no, I'm terrible. Never mind.
Right.
Bad idea.
Okay, we've got some in the 90s. These aren't that bad. But I mean, what do you have to play? Like Misic, Miller, George. I mean, Paul George, I don't have a problem with if you're playing that game. I mean, the lowest owned player in this lineup is Michael Bridges at 3.2% projected ownership. I mean, that's the worst thing in the world. Probably, I mean, I'm assuming that you don't want to play Michael Bridges today.
Not really, but I think that game is really interesting. That's a huge game for the Cup. I think the winner advances. So I think you're going to see tons of condensed minutes. Like that's a horrible game on paper, right? Like you never want to play Knicks Magic. Like that's a slow paced defensive battle, but like there's going to be guys that play minutes in the 40s in that matchup. And we can't project that. That's not going to show up in projections. So that might be a game that ends up being overowned. So if you get to some Bridges, I don't necessarily hate it, but he's certainly not somebody that I'm like, actively seeking out.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at some of these lineups. Evan Mobley, a lot of Paul George in these lineups. And
yeah, Sims loves Paul George right now.
But it also makes sense in the Misic lineups because you're playing a guy on the other side of the game, right? I mean, like I get these types of lineups where it's Misic, Miller, George. Like this isn't like awful, right? You still have Bridges, Lou Dort. Probably not the greatest play at 5,200. But this is what I mean by like looking through and going, what do I need to do in order to play this combination? And SimLabs, from at least the lineups that I'm building right now in large field contests, seem to want you to pair him with, want you to play more George, want Michael Bridges for whatever reason. I guess, Evan Mobley at
I think
7,800 in this
I
lineup.
really like it. I love Evan Mobley today. I think he's a fantastic play. The Wizards are just so horrible defensively. I think Mobley should be well over 8K in the spot. So I love that we're getting to Mobley and Sims.
So do you think that if you play okay, so it's this is an interesting type of concept. Mobley obviously plays across from the Wizards. You got Sar and Valanciunas there. What is your obviously correlations in NBA are not strong, so they exist, but they're not strong. I'm typically not a fan of playing centers from the opposite sides of the game that are going to be on the court at the same time for two reasons. One, they fight over the same rebounds, and they foul each other. So if, for instance, if Mobley has a big game, it's quite possible one of whoever's like Alex Sarr got 2 quick fouls, and now Valanciunas is in for way more minutes than Sarr.
Oh boy.
You understand what I'm saying? It's like, I take these things into account where it's like, it's Joel Embiid versus name it Miles Turner or something. I always I don't want to play both centers that are that opposite. Now, I typically don't want to play centers from the same opposite sides regardless, but at least you can make the case for the non-starters to get playing the one center and then the guy that's on the opposite side of the timeshare on the other side, because it's going to be foul. So if someone has a big game, a lot of times it's foul trouble related. It's some mismatch related where one guy, they have to play small for some reason, and then the center goes nuts, or vice versa, or they play small and now the center doesn't come in, and now it's multiple power forwards that get more minutes. I'm a lot more cognizant of centers on opposite teams than I am for point guards or defensive DVP. I don't care about any of that stuff. That's all built into the projections. But foul trouble and stuff like that, and defensive responsibilities, because we see a lot of times that we project the minutes as best as we can. Then the starting lineup comes out, and it's they're playing with 2 bigs this game instead of playing, or sometimes they play small with no bigs, and that dramatically changes the rotations for the teams. So
that's what we're seeing in this. That's what we're seeing with this game, is that we have projected Sar and Valanciunas to both start to compete with Mobley and Allen because the Cavs are so big. So I mean, we're seeing that with this very game.
But the question is that how much time on the court are they all going to see together at the same time? But throughout the game, not in the first 6 minutes. I'm talking about as we go on, right? Because the thing is that once someone gets 2-3 fouls on them, I mean, these rotations could drastically change, and one guy could, especially on the Sar and Valanciunas side, because they're cheaper. It's one guy could end up playing 32 minutes this game, and you want to play that guy.
Especially if it's Valanciunas. Right. Because Sar could bust if he plays high 20s or not achieve GPP winning value. Whereas Valanciunas, if Valanciunas plays 30 minutes in this game, I don't see him getting under 32 TK points. So, it's definitely, you're definitely hoping Valanciunas exceeds his minute projection here. And that's probably why he sims so well, is because it's accounting for that massive ceiling. Right. That's probably why he's simming so well, is because of that.
Well, in these lineups, I mean, I only ran 20, but I mean, I'm getting more Sar than Valanciunas. But you have no problem playing Paul. I mean, is Paul George? I mean, according to SimLabs, Paul George is the best play on the slate at 15% ownership at 7,500.
That's the thing. I don't like to besmirch the Sims. Okay. I am not as bullish as the Sims are on Paul George. Like, Sims absolutely loves him today. I mean, the price is excellent. The projected ownership right now is really quite nice. So it makes sense that he is simming that well. But he was not really on my initial radar. Like, as I was, I like to hand build, 5 or 10 teams before I go on the show just to see where I'm compared to Sims, to see where I'm compared with lineup HQ. I'm not as high on Paul George, but if he's still simming like that before tip, I mean, I'm not going to say no. But it's just not somebody I was initially that bullish on.
I mean, how about the other 76ers? I mean, do we Ricky Council, Gershon Yabusele? I mean, I think that what the Sims are tying in on is that a lot of these Misich lineups gain value by having Sixers in them. Like,
Correct.
that's what I mean. I mean, there are lineups that don't, but I mean, there aren't as many of them. And they also contain, I mean, obviously we're looking for Iguodaro lineups also, right? So Misich, Iguodaro, without Paul George. It's like once you say with no Paul George, you start not getting many lineups here. But I mean, this is especially true with Misich being 33% projected owned. If Misich only comes in at 20% owned, I'm assuming that some of this stuff changes because he's no longer over owned. I think the
Right.
Sims are taking that leverage component and saying, well, if you're going to play Misich and they already have Paul George as one of the most under-owned players, it's very similar to what I explained just earlier in the show that, hey, if you're going to play an over-owned guy, play an under-owned guy with him. And Paul George is under-owned, and it's in the same game. And Sims are like, yeah, you're right. And that's why it's happening.
I did notice in the prop market that we're very bearish on Tyrese Maxey props, and that's in RG projections and shot quality projections. So they're all over unders on Maxey because I initially wanted to play Maxey in these Philly Charlotte stacks, whereas the Sims wants you to play George instead of Maxey, and now I know why. It's because I think that we're just taking a stand on some of his projections via the betting market. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. As we compare our projections to Vegas, how they're posting their lines, we're taking a lot of Maxey unders right now.
Another guy that projects very well today is Jalen Williams. How high are you on him at 8,800? You're probably not going to be able to play Miller, Williams, and Barnes together, but is Jalen Williams, I mean, we take a look at the OKC total is 118.
Yep.
I mean, Lou Dort is coming up in some lineups as well. He really doesn't project that well. You got Hartenstein. We have Hartenstein as one of the more over-owned players on the slate at 22% projected owned. But I mean, Jalen Williams, SGA, Hartenstein, I mean, these are guys that have a positive salary adjusted value. They're just not Brandon Miller and Scotty Barnes. Do you have any interest in the Thunder?
So the Thunder might only be able to advance via point differential. So they might actually run up the score against the Jazz. That's really, really hard to quantify and really hard to project, but that may end up happening today. What I will say about Jalen Williams is I think Hartenstein is going to eat into his ceiling a little bit. Like you were talking about competing for the same rebounds, right? Hartenstein's a rebound machine. I actually took an over on his rebounds. That's just my personal take. The math does not say to do that. That's just based on vibes. It's 11.5 on DK. I took the over just because he should absolutely crush the inside of this game. I understand that he's over-owned in Sims. That makes sense. He's 22% projected ownership, but I think he makes for a really strong prop play. And I don't mind getting to these Thunder and GPPs because of the fact that if they're really crushing this game, they might keep their starters in against the Utah bench. So I think that they do make sense for large field GPPs.
Any other players that you're keying in on today?
I don't really have anybody else. I mean, again, I'll reiterate that Orlando New York game. It's a horrible game on paper, but that will be some really, really condensed minutes in that game. So I think that they're worth taking shots on. Like, no one's going to play New York. Neither of these teams are getting any ownership. We know where the minutes are going to come from, especially on the New York side. I think they're worth taking flyers on. It's very, very easy to just like match the field or get a little bit over. I took an over Cade Cunningham, 8.5 assists on DraftKings. It was minus 105 earlier. So I like Cade in the prop market, not necessarily for DFS. He's a little bit pricey. But I think that's it in terms of DFS.
Right. You could get SimLabs as part of our combo light package, so you don't have to pay for the whole premium everything. You get lineup HQ, you build 150 lineups, you get all of our tools and everything like that. You could just get SimLabs plus our premium written content, and you get SimLabs for all the 4 major sports. So you get NBA, MLB, NFL, PGA, and you get to use SimLabs all you want. You could do 150 lineups, you could save them, you could export them, you could do all the research you want, fool around with all the settings on SimLabs, as well as read our NBA written content. We got consensus value rankings and expert surveys and everything like that for a much lower price than our normal premium. So that's combo light. Click on the link in the description to get more information about that. Or you can also get the props and pick'em package, which is similar, where you get all of our statistical projections for all the sports, as well as our top 20 prop model and prize picks, underdog, all those sleeper, all those the pick'em type of sites. So we you get combo premium. You get everything. I mean, you just basically get everything you ever wanted, right? And you get $40 off your first month. But if you only want like little pieces and just going to use, during NBA season, I only do this. During NBA and MLB season, I only do that. You can switch between them and go, okay, well, I'm going to take off here. I'm going to do this then. But I mean, obviously during this point of the year, a lot of sports are going on at the same time. So I always suggest the combo premium. Get $40 off your first month. Click on the link in the description. Tim, what else you got? What else you got? You got NHL tonight, right?
Big NHL slate, and I'll be on Grinders Live this evening at 5 Eastern with Dean and Chop.
Dean and Chop. Anything else throughout the rest of the week also? Anything NFL related? Anything?
Just going to be in NHL Discord doing NHL projections throughout the week, and then I'll be back on Grinders Live, the People Show, on Sunday.
Yeah, always tune into that Sunday block, 9:30 in the morning for NFL. I always wake up, Tim. I always wake up to you, Dean, and Bobby. Typically, I have it, or I'm half asleep. I wake up. What I end up doing is I wake up sometimes at like 8:00, and then I just go to my YouTube app and put it on the stream, the upcoming whatever, and then leave my phone. I mean, because I have YouTube Premium, so I can do background whatever. And I end up falling back to sleep, and then I wake. I wake up in a dream where like it's next thing you know, in my head it's like T. Higgins. It's like why did I just dream about T. Higgins? And it's like Bobby talking about the Bengals passing game or something. It's like, right. Okay, that was like the last 3. Right. I wake up halfway through the show, and I'm like, okay, whatever I dreamed of the last thing, it wasn't a premonition. It was just something Bobby said.
I missed last show due to illness, so I'm just getting my health back finally.
Well, hit that thumbs up button to get Tim back to the 100% strength. So give me those thumbs. Hit the thumbs up button, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're new here, hit the notification bell to always know when we go live. Remember, 5:00 Eastern, Grinders Live for NBA. That's followed 6:15, 6:30 or so Eastern for crunch time, leading right up into lock. And I will see you tomorrow. We'll be previewing NFL Week 14 slate. We're almost done with NFL this year. Crazy. We're almost done. But I'll be on tomorrow for that. So until then, I'll be here. Like I always am, Tuesday through Friday. Talking about all things you're thinking about in daily fantasy, props, and pick 'em on RotoGrinders today.